Oliver scrutinized the face looking back at him in the mirror. The dark circles beneath his eyes, a week's worth of unshorn stubble, and a thoroughly haggard appearance spoke volumes. His eyes told a tale of sheer exhaustion and heartache. How did he end up like this? Where had he veered off course? Lowering his head, he shivered and started to recollect. A year ago, Oliver endured a harsh divorce. He had been with Ava for 7 years, raising a 3-year-old boy with her. Life in their home seemed filled with happiness, until one day, Oliver discovered that the child was not his flesh and blood. Turns out, his wife had an affair with her former lover, which led to unforeseen consequences. That man didn't want her, so she had no choice but to tell Oliver she was carrying his child. The unsuspecting husband had never been more delighted at such news. Desiring children deeply, he shed tears of joy upon hearing that he would have a son. His hair, the crushing disappointment when the truth surfaced was unimaginable. Now at 35, divorced, and with a shattered trust in women, he was a changed man. That single but profound love had obliterated all his faith and optimism for the future. Merely half a year later, life threw a curveball. Charlotte stepped into Oliver's world. At the bright age of 25, this young woman brought a refreshing burst of youth. Despite the notable age gap, her expansive knowledge and exceptional cleverness more than made up for it. Recently, she had capped off her academic journey with a master's degree and secured a position at a reputable local company. People often described her as sharp, fit, and fetching. It was puzzling what drew her to the perpetually somber and enigmatic Oliver. Yet, she had a penchant for mysteries, and Oliver became a puzzle she was eager to solve. She was utterly smitten with him, completely head over heels. Their paths crossed at a professional symposium hosted in a bustling arts center. Charlotte was a hive of activity, always engaging deeply in the panel discussions, capturing Oliver's attention from the start. He had recently resolved to abandon his solitary ways, feeling it was high time to re-engage with the social world and reintroduce himself to the dating scene. Seizing the opportunity during an intermission, he approached the lively and impressive young woman, lavished her with compliments, and asked if she'd like to join him for a coffee once the conference wrapped up. Charlotte, clearly intrigued, was quick to accept his invitation. Their love affair took off at breakneck speed. Charlotte was utterly smitten, tossing caution to the wind as she plunged headfirst into the romance. However, it wasn't long before Oliver's previous scars began to resurface. Whenever any male, even remotely, entered the picture, Oliver's jealousy skyrocketed to the point of extinguishing all reason. His bouts of aggression and accusatory remarks towards Charlotte surfaced, yet she handled these storms with a grace and clarity, always managing to soothe his fears by explaining the benign nature of her interactions. She looked upon her beau with adoring eyes, absolving him of all his transgressions. After several weeks, Charlotte started transitioning her life over to Oliver's place. First, it was her toothbrush that found a new home, followed by her hairdryer, a cascade of beauty products, and eventually items of clothing began to migrate from her closet. Before long, Oliver could no longer deny the permanence of her presence and suggested she move in officially. Charlotte was overjoyed by the proposal, eager to start a new chapter of closeness with her beloved. With her move, however, Oliver's insecurities flared anew, adding another layer of complexity to their intensifying relationship. Now he had an even greater rationale to exercise control over his youthful paramour. If she happened to be delayed, even for a mere 5 minutes, he bombarded her with inquiries. She never lost her composure during such instances and dutifully divulged everything to Oliver. This was her initial encounter with cohabitation, and she believed that this was how things should be, since Oliver was older and more worldly, and therefore presumably wiser. On one particular day, as they walked back from the store together, someone called out to Charlotte. When she turned around, she beheld her former classmate, whom they hadn't seen in ages. The girl ecstatically waved at him, prompting them to pause and engage in a brief chat for precisely 5 minutes. She introduced him to Oliver and proceeded to inquire about his whereabouts, how he ended up here, and how he had been faring. Oliver seethed with rage, his face turning a shade of purplish red. Upon their return home, he instigated a tumultuous scene, accusing Charlotte of flirting shamelessly with that young man right before his very eyes. For the first time, Charlotte felt offended, sparking a heated argument between the couple. Several weeks later, one evening, Oliver was waiting to pick up Charlotte from her office. As she slid quietly into the passenger seat, she placed her delicate hand gently on Oliver's forearm and gazed deep into his eyes. "Love, I have something significant to tell you," she whispered with a hint of mystery in her voice. "I wasn't certain before, but after taking a test today, it's confirmed. We're expecting a child." Her face lit up with a radiant smile as she looked eagerly into his eyes. Yet, Oliver's expression darkened rather than mirrored her joy. Suddenly, Oliver was consumed by a troubling memory of a recent encounter where Charlotte had chatted animatedly with an old school friend. This recollection collided with a painful episode from his past involving his ex-wife, who had deserted him for a former flame from her college days. An irrational suspicion overwhelmed him, igniting a furious outburst. "How could you pin another man's child on me? You think you can cheat, concoct a story, and expect me to believe those angelic eyes? Get out. Leave. This child isn't mine. Go back to your school friends." Oliver's voice escalated as he ranted, his hands flailing wildly. It was as if he was experiencing a visceral convulsion of anger. Charlotte had never anticipated such a response from the man she adored and the soon-to-be father of their child. At that particular moment, she was unusually receptive to his every utterance, yet he seemed to crush every one of her emotions mercilessly. Moreover, he hurled accusations at her of leading a promiscuous life. Overwhelmed and in tears, Charlotte bolted from the vehicle and vanished into the night. Meanwhile, Oliver was teetering on the brink. He abandoned the car in the parking area and headed straight for a tavern to quell the storm of emotions within him. As he settled into a seat at the bar, his phone erupted into life. It was William, his buddy. "Ollie, what's the scoop with you and Charlotte? I just caught a glimpse of her storming by. Totally livid, didn't even pause when I shouted her name." His friend's voice was tinged with worry. Oliver blurted out that his wife had conceived a child with another man, and now, much like his former girlfriend, was attempting to discredit his paternity. "Buddy, have you lost your senses? Why lash out at the girl? She's devoted to you, hangs on your every word, shields you from the slightest harm, and yet you're shadowed by this irrational jealousy. Ollie, this isn't you. Take a moment, think it through. Let go of Ava and her shenanigans. That's all water under the bridge." William's words prompted Oliver to reflect. He resolved to sober up, catch some sleep, and seek out Charlotte first thing in the morning. Right now, he was too inebriated for such a crucial conversation. Dawn broke, and with it, a throbbing pain enveloped Oliver's skull. Yet it was the agony in his chest that overwhelmed him the most. The harsh words he had hurled at his girlfriend the previous night haunted him. Filled with remorse, he swiftly freshened up and hailed a taxi to Charlotte's former residence, the home she shared with her mother. He incessantly rang the doorbell and dialed Charlotte's mobile for what seemed like an eternity, but to no avail. Just as he was about to give up, a neighbor emerged from her apartment, drawn by the commotion. "Hello, have you seen Charlotte?" Oliver inquired, his voice laden with urgency. The neighbor's face clouded over as she replied, "Yes, I've seen her, though I wish I hadn't." Ambulances whisked her away in the dead of night. The air was thick with screams. The poor child had ingested some pills, and they couldn't save her in time. Her mother was absolutely beside herself. Her voice trailed off as she made the sign of the cross. Oliver's knees buckled. He clutched the stair railing for support, muttering in disbelief, "This can't be happening. She must be mistaken." Overwhelmed and desperate, he scrambled to find the number of Charlotte's mother and dialed it frantically. The phone rang twice before her groggy voice answered on the third attempt, barely recognizing the caller through the haze of sedatives clouding her speech. Upon realizing she was speaking to the man responsible for her daughter's despair, her grief erupted into fury. She berated Oliver, screaming, "You destroyed her and the life she carried within her. She was expecting your child." Her words cut through him, sharper than any knife. The mobile slipped from his grasp and shattered on the solid steps. He couldn't even spare a moment to console this heartbroken mother. Overcome by sorrow, Oliver collapsed, his cries echoing in the air. The following days saw him drowning his memories in liquor, battling his remorse. He knew he had wronged the innocent girl and her family irrevocably. Drunkenly, Oliver appeared at the gravesite, tears streaming, pleading with his mother for absolution. His kin, fed up, barred him from the homestead, severing ties. Devastated, Oliver spiraled down, neglecting his duties and succumbing to self-destruction. Thankfully, his buddies got wind of his plight and stepped in. Although the ordeal scared him, Oliver gradually resumed his normal rhythm. This distressing saga profoundly transformed him. Charlotte had been his gem, steadfast, devoted, and tender. She endured his baseless fits of jealousy without bitterness, yet he foolishly let her slip through his fingers. Now he pondered deeply before casting unwarranted doubt on his close ones. He wallowed in despair for a prolonged period, yet time brought healing. Remarkably, fortune smiled upon him once again a few years later when he encountered another soul as kind and radiant as Charlotte. This time, he treasured her, valuing her above all else.